So I had this idea. I wanted to create something to capture and express a human emotion contained within an inanimate object. And it would have this beautiful, artistic, and poetic story behind it. So I built this bench. But none of that other stuff even matters anymore because it's overshadowed by the fact that this thing sounds like a space laser when you drag your hand along it. Like, it's wild, right? Let me slow down and explain a little bit though. Now, this is not a recent idea. This is something that I made for a class in college, and I think it achieved what I was going for on it, but I'll talk more about that later. I've just never really seen anything like this before, so I thought it'd be something interesting to talk about. Since I'm still waiting on other things for projects that I'm currently working on, I just thought it'd be a fun past project that I could share the details on, how it was made, the story behind it, kind of everything in between. Clearly, part of the design and what makes this so unique is its dowel top. It's like a bed of nails concept, and it feels no different to sit on. You don't even notice it at all. But it gives the bench a very unique experience when interacting with all of these different dowels. This whole bench essentially works like an instrument, that each and every one of these has its own note. In fact, yeah, I'll be honest with you. I had this entire bit planned where I was just gonna bust something crazy out, like Through the Fire and the Flames by Dragon Force. Turns out, that's kind of really hard, but I still edited together just a little clip of what it sounds like so you can hear it being played. Yeah, it's not great. It's kind of there, but it's definitely better off being a space laser instead. There's something to it. It's either out of pitch, the notes don't really hold very well, and look, I said it was an instrument. I never said it was a good instrument, okay? Nevertheless, I will still claim my title as the first person in the world to ever play the bench as an instrument. I feel like Patrick Star. Is the bench an instrument? So the real explanation to all of this is that it came from my graduate year studying architecture. I had a class where we had to design something to sit on, but it's a little more complicated than that. Part of architecture, or at least good architecture in my opinion, is about learning storytelling and how objects, buildings, spaces, whatever, can tell a story or get an idea across and give you an experience when interacting with them. Similar to painting, sculpting, really any of the arts, architecture is no different. And since buildings are large and complicated and take a long time to make, it's a lot easier to practice with smaller things to try and refine that skill of getting an idea across. Now, I realize I can talk way too long on all the big fluffy ideas of a project and the deeper meaning behind things, and I realize that can be a little much, so I'm just going to kind of condense all of this down. So the project brief was to design something to sit on, but to tell a story with it. The design that I had for this bench was meant to try and capture that feeling of discomfort of being close to random strangers in public, especially on something like public transportation. When traveling by subway, a bus, a train, flying, whatever, you almost give up your right to personal space, and it's always a little uncomfortable to have strangers that close to you sometimes. So I was trying to make something that could express that human feeling into an inanimate object, into the design of the bench itself. The surface of the bench doesn't even feel like individual dowels. You don't even notice them at all. It is meant to be a two-person bench, one side being that seat that you naturally gravitate towards, like a window seat on a bus, leaving that more kind of quote, uncomfortable seat open second that now has that increased perception of discomfort now. In reality, sitting next to a random stranger isn't that bad. It's just the idea of the interaction that could be uncomfortable that's the real perception to get past. And that's the same for the bench. That second seat is not uncomfortable. So a little about the design specifics. By giving the bench a slope, it does kind of two things for the idea. It gives a slight pushing away type motion, at the same time increasing the length of the dowels to really enhance that perceived discomfort. The other tactic that was used was a gradient of dowels, ranging from 1/2 inch on one side down to 1/8 inch on the other side, giving more surface area to that main seat. To help visualize the two seats, I added in some pieces of white oak in the middle. And again, this also serves two purposes, as it visually emphasizes it, but it also helps brace the box frame so that there's not a racking problem. So let's talk about how this thing was actually built, because there's a lot of very unique and specialty things for this piece. First off, this wasn't the first iteration that I had of this. It was a conglomeration of a bunch of different ideas that I molded in 3D and sketched out for a profile. And you can actually see a lot of the parts that went into this final version. Now that I had the general shape, I knew that I wanted the dowels and the interior supports to be different colors than the rest of the frame to set them apart. So I went for a walnut waterfall that would wrap around the entire box. I'll be honest, I'm a complete sucker for any waterfall edge, just because I think it adds so much to any piece. It's not a difficult joint to make by any means, it just takes a little bit of extra planning, but I think that that tiny little bit of extra work goes an insanely long way. And for this piece especially, it took an unreasonable amount of planning because I wanted to keep the live edge on, and for all of the miters to line up, I actually went through the board and measured out where each one would be so I could find the kind of the most calm area in the live edge so that I would have the best chance of everything matching up. Even for the feet too, I wanted them to just be another larger scale of the dowels to just fit in and be very subtle, but give the box frame a visual look like it's just floating above the surface. The top was obviously the hardest part. I had to tilt the drill press at a 5-degree angle and then set a depth similar each time I would change the bit size for the different gradients that went through the top. The fun part about this though was that the throat of the drill press was not deep enough to go the whole way across, so I would have to stop, tilt the table back another 10 degrees the other way to finish the other holes on the side that I couldn't reach, and that's for each and every row. I seem to just specialize in designing nightmare projects at this point. And for those of you that are wondering, there are 1,543 dowels on the top, all friction fit into place. And that leads us back to the acoustical byproduct of all of this again. From the initial small scale test that I had done, just to visually see what it would look like, I knew it would have some acoustical quality, but I couldn't imagine it sounding like this. So the intent moving forward is still to focus on the process of making all these other projects and future ideas, but I just thought this would be an interesting kind of filler episode as I wrap everything else up, but there is full build projects coming very soon. But until then, thanks for watching. Okay, just one more.